Hi, this is Mason here, and you listen to Coffee Kenobi.
Oh, thank the force! This little thing has had me worried sick.
My name is Kenobi. I'm the day shift manager on level 5.
You are Master Assassin Fennec Shand of the Midroom.
You should have killed me when you had the chance.
This is Ashley Eckstein, Ahsoka Tano from Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Coffee with Kenobi. I am your host, Dan Zehr, delighted to have a Star Wars conversation with you. Since May 2013, I've been committed to creating a positive, family-friendly, spoiler-free place for our Star Wars community. Imagine walking into your favorite coffee shop and joining a lively discussion about Star Wars films, Disney Plus live action, animation, books, comics, collectibles, or Star Wars experiences at the Disney theme parks. My hope is to bring that sense of community to this podcast, my website, special events, live video experiences, email newsletter, and more. Join our Star Wars community at coffeewithkenobi.com and be part of something truly special. Thank you to the official travel partner of Coffee with Kenobi, MEI and Mousefan Travel. Check out coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefan-travel for a no cost, no obligation quote, and let them know Coffee with Kenobi and Dan Zehr sent you. Speaking of Mousefan Travel, Coffee with Kenobi and Mousefan Travel are going on the Disney Wish June 16th to the 20th. It's a special Coffee with Kenobi Disney Wish cruise on the Disney Wish cruise line. They have the Hyperspace Lounge, the only cruise ship on the planet, truly, that has a Star Wars lounge. You have Padawans with you that are going to join you or considering being a part of our incredible experience on the Disney Wish. There are some wonderful cargo bay experiences for the children as well. Check out coffeewithkenobi.com/DisneyWish for your no cost, no obligation quote. On today's show, I've got a treasure trove of special guests as we rank the Disney Plus Star Wars live action series. It's going to be quite a challenge, and I'm looking forward to bringing you the conversation. So pull up a chair, grab your favorite coffee mug, and have some coffee with Kenobi. Here we are, friends. We have got a very special, dare I say, intense show coming your way. We are going to rank and rate the Star Wars live action series on Disney Plus. These will not be animation. I feel like that's kind of a separate conversation, and the water's already going to be muddy as it is. Now, for the purposes of this conversation, we're going to rank seasons 1, 2, and 3 of The Mandalorian as separate entries, and I think that will be clear as we go through our rankings. But first, let's bring in our guests. We've actually got 3 guests on the show today. 1 is a brand new guest to Coffee with Kenobi, and 2 are returning guests. First, let's bring in our new guest, Bob Gerard. Bob, welcome to the show.
Dan, thank you so much for having me. It is an absolute pleasure to be here and to engage with some fellow long time Star Wars fans of a certain age.
Yes, I think we should. And Bob, if you are unaware, I've been on several of Bob's shows. Bob's latest show is short for a Stormtrooper, a 15-minute Star Wars podcast, which we absolutely love, and we'll give Bob a chance to talk about that later. But Bob, very excited to have you on the show. Also joining us, returning guest, Dr. Gregory Cass from Rebel Base Card Podcast. And by the way, this is what I recommend you do. Get a Star Wars bingo card of all the Star Wars podcasts. Gather your family around the table, and Dr. Cass will help you get bingo because he is the guest host with the most. Greg, welcome back.
Oh, thank you so much for the invitation. I mean, as you alluded to, it's a little bit of a painful task tonight, but I'm still glad to be here. And I will, as I tend to do when you invite me on, Dan, I want to start by embarrassing you and say, I spent my whole winter break in your new encyclopedia that you and your collaborators put together. And it is an amazing book and just a really wonderful treasure trove. And so kudos to you, the other writers, and of course your designers who lay out those those pages. But what a special book. If people are hanging on to those Christmas gift cards, cash them in, grab that encyclopedia.
Well, I'm so eternally grateful. Thank you for that. Also joining us, I had the good fortune to share the Steam into Star Wars stage with Greg on a couple shows. He is the guru of the Rival Base Card podcast, Mr. Greg McLaughlin. Greg, welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's kind of funny because your Steam episode just released, and it starts off. I'm like, I'm hearing myself. What's wrong with this? And then I'm waiting for would this clown shut up so we can get to the good stuff in the Coffee with Kenobi podcast. But thank you once again for having me on. Greg talked about this encyclopedia, and I felt like I should come over just to balancing out and going, it's okay, and just leave it at that. But I'm also interested in how Bob can do a 15-minute podcast, because I guarantee you, between the two Gregs, we're on no show we're ever on goes 15 minutes. I'm like, what is this 15 minutes you speak of? Because I'm
all about efficiency, Greg. It's all about efficiency.
And on Coffee with Kenobi, we have no filibustering. So Greg might be on a lot. All right. So what I did, let's go around and we'll go Greg, Dr. Cass, Bob, and myself. What we'll do is we'll just go backwards from 9 to 1. And as I said, we'll just go through them all. We've got Mandalorian seasons 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to try to go, let's see. And then after that, we had Book of Boba Fett, then Obi-Wan Kenobi. I think that's right. Then Andor, then Ahsoka, then The Acolyte, and then Skeleton Crew. I believe that is the correct order of the releases of these. Greg, before you give us your number 9, how did you compile your list?
I'm glad you asked that, and I'll make this kind of quick because this was a perfect Coffee with Kenobi assignment. So a buddy of mine, Paul, and I, this weekend, we kind of spent breaking this down. And so we ended up kind of coming up with a small system of about 5 different categories, because there was different elements of each that could rate one higher than the other. And we kind of attacked it a number of times over the weekend. One was literally over coffee and bagels Saturday morning. We were back in a pub watching some football, going back over this, and even refining it, going back and even watching some of these episodes just to kind of remind ourselves. And, and as a preface, I didn't talk to Greg about this at all. So we're really on brand. So we didn't talk about it. We didn't share notes, but this was kind of a fascinating one because it really meant you're kind of pitting shows up against each other. And then, there's no biases. It's just sort of when you kind of break it down and you go back over, it was an amazing task, but I'm so Coffee with Kenobi to do this with friends and just kind of go over in a civil. I mean, it was very civil and it was just awesome. So I just wanted to say thanks for throwing this out there. I might actually take this and throw it to some of the folks in our circles and go, I'd be curious what some other folks have to say. I know they'll be talking about it on the chat, but when it comes to number 9, we're working our way back up. Yes. Sadly, I'm going to go Book of Boba Fett. And if just to kind of throw it out there, we like the characters, right? But it gets hindered because Mando kind of took a lot of the wind out of its sails. And so there was some of that mystery that we kind of already had gone over. The story, apparently people don't like it when you go back and forth. They're really not crazy about long flashbacks. You can get away with some, but it just doesn't work. I thought the cinematography was okay. The music, I liked the theme music, but it was kind of okay. Execution was really low. And so on my list, Book of really is number 9. But that doesn't mean it just means of a list of great Star Wars stories, it's just the last on the list.
Absolutely.
What's your least favorite ice cream flavor, right? There's no bad answer.
It's all ice cream.
Exactly. Right. Well, I had a good friend who once told me, I was talking about the Indiana Jones movies, and he said they're like pizza. Even when they're not great, they're still better than just about anything else. And I think that is an important. So I'm glad you started that, Greg, because yes, even though it's low on our list, it doesn't mean it's not good. It just means there's some that hit us a different way for whatever reason. Dr. Cass, how did you make your list, and what is your number 9?
Well, on the movie review podcast I'm on a lot, we talk about the gap between your head and your heart, right? And I think people who study literature and film do that a lot. And I want to say for my list, I went pure heart. I just thought, what have I had the best time watching? What have I found the most enjoyable? And while, I can pick apart and critique writing, cinematography, all that, it often matters to me most. Do I have the big goofy Star Wars grin on my face? And that's my criteria. And so I want to agree with what you were all three just saying. And, yes, I have a number 9, but it is not by any means something bad. And Bob, you nicely queued us up by saying we are of a certain age, and to be in a place where you can say, oh, of the 9 Star Wars television shows, I didn't quite care as much for this one is pretty incredible, considering where we were when I became a fan in the dark times and other periods along the way. So my least favorite, but still a flavor of ice cream I really enjoy eating, is also Book of Boba Fett. And I want to shout out, it is where we saw Tashi Station and Cammy and Fixer. It is where we saw Black Chrysanthemum. It is where we saw an okay live action Cad Bane. I still have some quibbles, but a lot of those things were just really thrilling. So even though it's the one that I haven't returned to and that I don't have, a lot of strong memories of, it's still a pretty good time in the Star Wars universe.
Outstanding. That one of the best parts about the show. Maybe I should do the video for these someday, because seeing the looks on your faces, the excitement which people can hear, it's just so palpable seeing these fine gentlemen sharing their thoughts. Bob, I'm excited for yours as well. How did you make your list, and what is your number 9?
Well, I'll tell you I'll tell you the mechanics of how I made my list was I use Google Keep, right? And I put them all in a checklist. I'm showing the guys on the screen right now, so I could just move them around, and I kind of just shuffled them around like Post-it notes. But what wound up on the bottom, which again, all the kudos about, it's still good. I'm going to play with the rules just a little bit, Dan, as a new guy. Please. It's also the Book of Boba Fett, but it's specifically the episodes of the Book of Boba Fett that Robert Rodriguez directed. Because the ones that Robert Rodriguez didn't direct actually are one notch ahead of what my number 8 is. Okay, so let me explain that, which I'm surprised about, because I really like Robert Rodriguez. I love his more grown-up stuff, his more kind of Quentin Tarantino stuff. I also love Spy Kids that my kids grew up on. I felt like when Robert Rodriguez was coming in, he didn't really know if he wanted to go the Spy Kids route or the more adult route. And so, you think about the episode where he brought in Boba Fett to the Mandalorian. That was amazing. That was a little bit more grown up, like heavy duty action. But then we had, the speeder gang with their Dayglow speeders, and that just felt a little bit more kiddie. So those episodes didn't work quite as much for me. So I'm going to agree with my friends here, say Book of Boba Fett is number 9. But I do have some affection for the non-Robert Rodriguez ones. Specifically, I really liked that Return of the Mandalorian episode that Bryce Dallas Howard directed. I watched it again this morning just to double check it and make sure. And yes, I really like that one. I know it's a little controversial, but I like that episode.
I have a feeling that may come up a little bit later in the show. All right, good start. Mine was sometimes I fly through these lists and it just kind of springs forth because I spend an inordinate amount of my mental headspace on trivial things like this, as I'm sure we all do. This one was hard because some I hadn't revisited in a long time, and I had to kind of refresh my memory. I pulled up Disney Plus and I would kind of go through ones that I remembered and just would watch particular scenes and kind of saw how they landed. Because for me, my list is about what moves my emotional Star Wars needle. Where does that adrenaline come in? Dr. Cass, I forget how you described it, but did you say what did you say? It makes you Star Wars smile, or what did you say?
My goofy Star Wars grin when it's just, you're just in the zone.
Yes. So based on that, yes, these definitely are all about that, giving you that wonderful, beautiful Star Wars grin. It comes with sometimes with adrenaline and a lot of emotion. So my number 9 is really more like a number 20. This did not give me a grin. I did not like this at all. And it's The Acolyte. Now, I said this a bunch on the shows. I take no pleasure in it. I do not enjoy not liking it. I wanted to like it, but I have to be honest with myself. To me, the fractured character development, the disjointed storytelling, and it just, I don't want to bash it. I know a lot of people liked it. I did not like it. I found it every time a new episode came on, I found it felt like math homework. And, Dr. Cass, you probably can relate to this too, because we're English people. It just did not work for me at all. And it had nothing to do with anything other than I didn't like how the story was told. The lightsaber, spectacular. The action sequence was great. It looked beautiful, but the performances didn't work. The twist at the end was not a twist. And I just felt very frustrated the entire time. So sadly, this is my number 9.
Yeah, but I mean, I think you were honest the entire run when you were doing your shows, and I would say that Greg and I every week, and then listening to some of the other podcasts as well, because I mean, people would say like, "Are we being fair to this?" And I would say like, one, go back to the ice cream. It's ice cream, but it's okay. And I think that you have said over and over to us, it's like if you have like, as long as you can kind of talk about it, that's the important part.
Yeah.
I think to dismiss it out of hand is one thing, and that's where you get on social when you're talking about folks that just kind of go, there's a lot of hard work that went into it, all this kind of stuff, but it's okay if it doesn't hit.
Right. If it was ice cream, I would have been fine with mine melting. But again, I feel just sort of sick even saying that. I don't enjoy it saying that because I know other people really like it. But all right, let's go to number 8. Greg, back to you.
This was another one where I think these two kind of flipped-flop from time to time. And even going back over, with my friend and stuff, we were kind of like, I would say Mando season 3. And once again, it suffers from kind of the same thing where you do have where the stories kind of dip in and out. And along with certain elements of the Acolyte that kind of go out of sequence in some cases. But I did feel that it was not capturing a lot of the magic of the first two, and it was kind of like trying to make up. And you start to wonder now of like, if we'd had a Rangers of the New Republic, would some of these problems have been fixed and they not had to spill into some of the other ones that kind of knock down some of the chess pieces to some of these games? And so I'll give them that. There are some excellent elements in this, but when I kind of went through, I wasn't crazy about Moff Gideon's demise. I thought the music was fine. The cinematography was fine. It just was like across the board. This is kind of like, some great characters, but kind of meh at the end of the day. And I loved seeing Mando and Grogu, fireside, out hanging out by the camper. That was to me the best thing. And it's almost like I'd almost rather not have a movie because I'm like, please just leave the characters alone. Like they've been through so much. But some of the stuff on Mando, it was okay, but it was a little bit of everything. And it tried to kind of push us to say like the Mandalorian as a group as a whole. And I like that. There's some elements I like, but some it just kind of took me out. And, Greg and I went back and forth on the one with, Jack Black and all that. It kind of took it out. I liked it, but it was just crazy. But anyway, that's my number 8.
Absolutely. I really like how the two of you specifically handled that episode. I remember distinctly the two of you talking about that. Dr. Cass, back to you. What's your number 8?
Oh, I don't like to be in sync with my co-host so often, but it is also Mando season 3. And, I think, Greg, you alluded to this within your comment, which is the first 2 seasons of Mandalorian worked for me like beautiful chapters in a longer story and kind of felt like they had a purpose and a direction. And I thought that was kind of missing in season 3, that it felt like it didn't have as clear a sense. Now, I think part of that is we all got surprised by how quickly some events came. When that second episode dropped, we're like, wow, we're on Mandalore already and we're figuring out the Darksaber and all that. And I do like the surprise. I like when all of us know-it-alls have, wrong theories and have to adjust our expectations. But then it just felt like the show wasn't entirely sure what it wanted to say. And the whole thing with, I kind of have to beat Din Djarin to become the owner of the Darksaber, but oops, it counted when it did that thing 3 episodes ago, but we didn't talk about it till now. It just all felt a little sloppy to me and a little less kind of clear in its direction. But again, and where I think I do differ from Greg, and I may not be as popular as, I thought the episode focused on Dr. Pershing was phenomenal. That's one I really loved, and I think it caught a lot of fans for a loop because it was so different. But I have come to really like. Anytime we spend with Dr. Pershing, but also Katie O'Brien's character, all are really fun to see her out there kind of becoming a major movie star now in Twisters and some other things this year. So that's
cool.
a standout. There's always something good, but it's not a season for me.
I didn't even think about the Twisters connection. Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, that's well said.
I missed that was her. Interesting.
Yeah, same.
Well,
or
now,
them. I
now
think
you
it's
did
them.
it. You can't open up movie trivia. So in Twister, she is often in a car with Wim's dad, who is also in the movie Twisters.
No kidding.
And the director of that is Lee Isaac Chung, who did the Pershing episode of Mando season 3 and an episode of Skeleton Crew as well.
He's not the best co-host in the business for nothing, kids.
It all
He's
makes
just the guy who
sense.
sees Kume movies.
And like everything on our corporate learning podcast, it still all comes back to Star Wars. So that absolutely makes sense.
Absolutely. All right, Bob, what is your number 8?
I'm noticing as we go that to me, there seems to be a big dividing line between like the top 4 or 5 and the bottom 4 or 5. I kind of anticipate we're going to be grouping them, but kind of shuffling within them. So with that said, I'm going with Acolyte is my number 8. For a lot of the same reasons that you said, Dan, it just didn't quite work for me as much as the other things did. And I do really like people playing with different things and experimenting with different ideas in Star Wars. And I'll talk about some of that as a positive moving forward. I felt like with the Acolyte, this was one of the things where some of the things that they played with, some of the experimentation just didn't really work for me. And, it kind of answered questions that I didn't necessarily have. So I was disappointed in it overall. I was so looking forward to it. I was so looking forward to focusing on a Sith character. I was so looking forward to the High Republic setting. And it just didn't quite deliver for me. But still, it's ice cream.
There you go. Well, I'm glad. I'm glad you're not lactose intolerant. Okay, so my number 8 is another 3-way tie. Just like the first round was a 3-way tie. This time I'm sticking with the Gregs. It's Mandalorian season 3. I'm not going to say I struggled with it because I don't know that I struggled, but I think the show, that season, struggled because to me, the Mandalorian and Grogu's arcs, they wrapped up. The story was done.
Yep.
And everything, this season should have been called Bo-Katan and the Mandalorians, because it really, even though it was about the Mandalorian, it was about him in name only. He was not really a major character. Some of the things happened kind of quickly. Yes, there were some aspects that I thought were fascinating. I too was disappointed that what happened with Moff Gideon. I found his big master plan to be pretty. I don't know how to. It was just. I found it to be just false. It just. It just felt strange, and I mean, not like he's a deep character, because he's not. He's not a deep character, but it just seemed like, let's make him as a basic mustache twitching villain, and what he was planning all this time just seemed inauthentic. It just didn't work for me. I thought the end of is Paz Vizsla, right, in that one? He's I get my Vizslas confused all the time. I shouldn't.
The heavy Mando.
Yeah. I thought what they did with him was terrific. I thought his heroic sacrifice the end against those Praetorian guards was fabulous. And I thought there were some fun moments, but when you compare it to the first 2 seasons, it's not even in the same universe as far as I'm concerned. Not literally Star Wars universe, but just mean like level of quality and the level of moving that Star Wars needle for me. So that's my number 8. All right, Greg, back to you for number 7.
And this is where I think it goes less as far as like shows that, hit towards the bottom of the list, but again, being compared against those on the top of the list. And I say this, going to the Acolyte for number 7. it has a lot of great things going for it, but it's sort of one of those where, you know, anytime there was this noise about us when we were doing our show, and we really enjoyed covering it, and it was a lot of fun. It was like fun. I loved learning a lot of the lore. But at the end of the day, it was just really, it created for itself a lot of problems. And I would say that, you know, being greenlit at a different time in the streaming, in the streaming life, you know, it comes out in a much different time. You know, it's like Skeleton Crew also gets greenlit early, but comes out at a different time. But I would say also that what our expectations and what Disney Plus's expectations and all this kind of goes in, but there is still, when we were kind of scoring it, we liked the cinematography. You know, the music was good. Some of the story does suffer a little bit. There are a couple of cringe moments for me, and one was, you know, when at the very beginning when she's trying to go in there and challenge the Jedi with a crazy phrase, and you're going like, okay. And similar to some of the mod scenes in Book of Boba Fett, where you're like, really? Sometimes it gets hard to, and there are those moments in all of Star Wars. But I just thought this one, I liked a lot what it brought to the table. But at the end of the day, there's just, when I compare it to the rest of the list, it kind of got bumped down a little bit.
Okay, fair enough. Appreciate your honesty. Dr. Cass, you're number 7. Are you tying again with your co-host?
No, we're splitting. And I was just going to say, I almost want to pass this around because I think this is the one that's going to lose me friends on the internet. But like you said, we got to be true. And I'm going with my heart. And so I have at number 7, Ahsoka, which is a season I struggle with still. And there, as we've said, there are some high highs. But for me, I thought Ahsoka was trading too much on nostalgia for those characters. It was, we've got Sabine, we've got Ezra, we've got Hera, and I didn't really find the story they were telling nearly as compelling. I thought some of the mythology choices were strange. We're going to go to a whole new galaxy. It's going to be just kind of another planet, kind of like anything else, you know? And so I struggled with some of those choices, and the connection between Sabine and Ahsoka, which makes up such a heart of that series, I thought we yada, 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 the interesting part of that relationship, which is whenever they train together, and you're just filling in the gaps. And like, you know, a little bit like what you said about the Acolyte, Dan, it's like, you didn't tell that so you could then have the revelation of how it went down and so on. So, you know, again, great that so many people love those characters. Rebels is something I'm a little softer on than a lot of fans, so I'm sure that's playing a role here. But you know, I'm excited to see it continue, and I hope maybe that if they get some good momentum and make it less of a cliffhanger, it might rise in my rankings. But with apologies to many members of the CWK Alliance I could name by name who are gonna put my head on a spike. I'm sorry that Ahsoka falls at number 7 for me. Hey,
I pride our community on just the kindness and the honesty, and I think you have to have those. So I very much appreciate what you said. Bob, number 7.
Well, Dr. Cass, I am shocked that you put Ahsoka at 7, because that's exactly where I slot it to. Ahsoka was my number 7 as well. But it's interesting to hear your discussion of it compared to mine, because I am passionate about Rebels. I think Sabine Wren is one of my favorite characters. And I thought the portrayal of Sabine was really good. I was a little questioning about, she turns out to be a Force user and be a Jedi, but also I'm a big fan of the, you know, anybody can use the Force. It's about training and not about you're naturally born with it, midichlorian argument. So that's just me. The biggest issue that I had with Ahsoka was it took a long time for me to really get into it. And, you know, I'm sure, like you guys, when you watch these shows for the first time, you're texting with your other friends who are watching it at the same time. And I remember getting to, I think it was about the 3rd episode, where there was the chase through the Red Forest. And it just, the episode started with a lot of action. It really drew me in. And I texted my friends and I said, this is the episode we've been waiting for this show. Like, it took that long for me to get into it. And then, kind of through the rest of it, there were moments where it really drew me in and I was very engaged and very excited about it. And then there were times where I was just scratching my head or just feeling like it wasn't quite delivering. So again, it was still good for me, but it was just a little bit disappointing. I was really, really looking forward to Ahsoka. I love the character. I didn't even mention Ahsoka. I love the character of Ahsoka Tano. I think about watching the Clone Wars animated movie, in the theaters that first night going, what is this garbage? Who is this character? And then it leads to, the most beloved character in the Star Wars universe. I'm looking forward to Ahsoka season 2 as well. I hope that they can pull something out that's going to be a little more to my liking.
Boy, my list is going to be a whole lot different later on in the show.
Yeah, I keep waiting for us to greatly diverge, but I can't believe the two of you put Ahsoka at number 7 because I did too.
We're alienating your entire audience, Dan. What's going on?
No, we're not, because you got it. Intellectual honesty and critical thinking. That's one of the most fundamental aspects of the show. Look, what the two of you said, I'm on board with. I thought the middle of the season was fabulous. There were some moments in those middle episodes where I thought, this is perfect live action Star Wars. Everything clicked. Everything was delightful. I thought what made it fall off the rails for me a bit was the first couple episodes. Everyone was very cold. The whole how you described, Dr. Cass, the relationship between Ahsoka and Sabine, they very much yada over it. None of those emotional beats were earned. They were contrived. And that bothered me. The ending was not an ending. I talked to the Marvel Comics legend Dan Slott. You may have heard him on the show a couple years ago, and we talked about the end of Ahsoka. And he agreed that there wasn't an end. Like, there are all these cliffhangers that are artificial. Look, a cliffhanger is suspenseful, and there's a payoff, but it doesn't interrupt the story itself. The way they ended with Baylan Skoll was injustice to that character because they didn't know that. But the way he ended, it would just seem random. The end of his relationship with his Padawan, his Sith, not a Sith, but his apprentice was just sort of unraveled for no reason. Finally, seeing Ezra reunite with Hera I felt very almost fraudulent. There was really nothing to that. And as much as I liked some of the actors portraying the characters, Hera took the longest for me to get to kind of gravitate towards, and then she sold it for me when she was in front of that Senate committee, if that's what they were. And then the fact that Sabine was suddenly force sensitive, I despise that. Because Sabine was just fantastic. Sabine Wren is a fantastic character, a top 10 character in all of Star Wars. She did not need that. She didn't need that. She was already great the way she was. You don't need to be a Jedi or use the Force to be a good character. And I felt like that just bothered me. I just didn't like that. I do not agree that anyone can use the Force. I don't think that's true. Pablo's actually talked about that a lot. Han Solo, there are Force things in, but he doesn't know the Force. I mean, everybody's got midichlorians because it's a part of your life. But so yeah, Ahsoka, I would say of all of them, Ahsoka was the one I was disappointed in. The rest of them I didn't really have expectations. Ahsoka I did, and it sort of let me down. I am excited for season 2. Season 1, not something I think I'm going to revisit very much. And I hate that I have to say, it's just, doesn't it stink?
Okay,
you know what I mean, guys?
Yeah.
We're here where it's like a therapy session.
Well, and on that, Dan, when we were talking, my friend and I were talking about Mandalorian, it's like, if we had done these as a series as a whole, Mando 3 brings down Mando,
absolutely,
as it were. And so, and Mandalorian also being one of the only ones here that have multiple seasons. And so when you say looking for, like all that, but still looking forward to season 2, that tells you like, yeah, it's the same thing if we were talking about like another season of Acolyte. It's like, it is all in the execution of this. Yep. And, I'll have some things to say about Ahsoka later on. And I'm going to feel pretty darn silly saying it, but it is, but each of these kind of come, but I would say that, it's fine saying it because it doesn't mean we love it any less. It just really means that, here's what we just saw. everybody watched it, and it was nice that it was kind of appointment TV.
Right.
And we had a chance to all watch
and that
together.
was nice.
And it's just kind of hitting on different things, but some of these things are a lot more glaring than others. And especially, and Greg's talked about it a lot as far as like, some people just didn't dig the animation as much. Some people, and so there's a lot of things that go into it when you sit down and you're watching this. And so.
And I'm not someone who thinks that if it's not done the way I want it to be done, then it's bad. I don't think that at all.
Right.
I mean, people who are making this are far smarter than me, and God bless them, but it just didn't work for me. All right, Greg, I think we're on number 6.
We are on number 6.
Yeah.
And this is not necessarily a retribution pick to my co-host. It just, once again, as we work our way up these lists, you have to start thinking of these as shows competing against others. It's the whole list thing is tough. It's like it's like rating, players of different sports in different eras. It's just something, it's a great exercise. But when you start putting these up against, that's where I come to number 6, and it's Obi-Wan. And it's not necessarily because I didn't enjoy the series, but Obi-Wan, I think, to me, suffers from a bit of when it was filmed, which was during COVID. And so some of its visual, some of its visual kind of shortfallings really come loose. And especially if, like, for example, if we go back to Ahsoka for a minute and you go to, Hayden's, scenes with Ahsoka, as opposed to, the Attack of the Clones-ish Ewan McGregor with Hayden Christensen, which was an amazing scene, but it's hard to kind of get past that. And you really I just want to see them together. It's amazing. But some of the other ones where you can tell it's really the volume. I mean, whereas like in Mandalorian, we had no idea what the volume was, and you go, oh, wow, that's really good. By the time you get to Obi-Wan, you're like, yeah, that's the volume. And you're like, okay, I can see that, especially when one of those sequences where Obi-Wan and Darth Vader are together and you're going, really? You just couldn't walk? Anyway, those are one of those things where you take away from some, but there are some amazing elements in Obi-Wan. And I love, we talked about, the Inquisitor Clubhouse? One of my favorite parts of Obi-Wan.
Inquisitorious, yeah.
And some of those things there, and it was just like, it was really great. But I think also the fact that Obi-Wan, as far as how they had to kind of wedge it in, shows like Skeleton Crew get a whole lot more leeway as far as the time they're able to tell and what they're able to tell. Obi-Wan was, rewritten a bit, and it was kind of like sandwich as far as like, oh, we can tell this, but not this. There were some great tantalizing things in it, but I thought it was a bit constrained. And that's really one of the only reasons why I kind of rate it low. Once again, I am comparing it against some of the other ones that may have just had benefited from time, execution, and all that, and when it came out.
Fair enough. Absolutely fair enough. This is the first time Obi-Wan Kenobi has come up. Okay, Dr. Cass, we are on.
Sorry, I'm just finishing a quick email. And that, sir, is why I can no longer serve breakfast with.
We're not going to make it to episode 100, basically, is what he's telling me. That's fair. That's fair.
I would expect Dr. Cass's to be a little bit higher than that. We'll see.
Yeah. Either of you guys can come join me if you need to. It's,
okay.
Refuge in a
Won't be 15 minutes anymore, pal. I'll tell you that.
Well, I'm playing catch up on this pick, and this is where I have slotted in the Acolyte. And I think you gentlemen have covered it quite nicely. I will say I am a massive High Republic fan. I've read every page of it so far, and I really thought that the show was done a disservice by branding it as High Republic, because it didn't have the spirit of that initiative. It had one character or a couple characters technically, but they weren't those characters. They just shared a name and a basic design. So I found that really hard to kind of swallow. But I will say one of the things that buoyed it up in, and I know this applies to at least Dan as well, when my son gets really engaged by one of these Star Wars shows, it kind of adds a few points to it, and I got to share the Acolyte with him. Very funny. He demanded that we order the Hasbro helmet, and then they delayed it. When we pre-ordered it, it said September 2024, and it got delayed to September 2025. And so I don't know that he even now could name that we ordered that or cares about it. But in the moment, it felt really special to share that with him. And he was really into those characters and those duels. So I pushed the Acolyte up a little bit in my list because, again, I'm voting with my heart. But personally, I enjoyed The Acolyte. I watched every episode. I talked about it with Greg. I'm sure we talked about it on like 10 shows I was on. And then I haven't thought much about it in the 6 months since. And to me, that's kind of more and more the ones that are getting higher on the list than this one are ones that have stuck with me a little bit more. So I think it says something about the experience there. But, I do enjoy it all the same. Star Wars is Star Wars.
I think there's an important delineation in that. Does it stick with you over time? And by the way, enjoying it with your son, that's more important than anything that I've said. I mean, I agree.
Always.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yep. Okay, Bob, we are back to you with number 6.
Just before I jump into my number 6, it reminded me, I forgot to mention Khmer. What a great villain, right? But like the grand reveal that he was the villain, we were all like, yeah, we know. Like we all knew. It was like Matt the radar technique. Where it's like, yeah. You're Kylo Ren. It kind of.
I had an English professor who used to call it being slapped with a wet trout. It was so obvious.
That's evocative.
Yeah,
absolutely. All right, so number 6 we're on. This is where I slot Mando season 3, and I will only spend a few seconds on this because you guys have talked about some of the challenges with Mando season 3 very eloquently. The reason, the thing in my heart that made me bump it up a couple slots is, again, I'm guessing that you guys, like me, in the late 70s, read that original run of Marvel comic books, right? Like 1 through 6 were the adaptation, and then 7 onward, right? And we got Jackson, and we got Don Juan Quixote, and just the goofy silliness that me being 10 years old took as, this is serious sci-fi, man. This is amazing. But now I look back on it fondly and go, this was so dorky and goofy, but just absolutely fun. And that's what I felt about some of the high spots of Mandalorian season 3 for me, was I just went into it going, it's like those old Marvel comic books. It's just kind of goofy. And so, yeah, I can deal with Lizzo and Jack Black and how crazy their characters were and how crazy that episode were. I had some fondness in my heart for that because it brought back that joy of reading those Star Wars comic books. Because remember back then, that was all the content that we were getting, and there was no internet.
Everything was on the table.
Yep.
I wish that I had you on my shoulder when that season came out, because that's a terrific way to look at it. It really is. I think what threw it for me was that the seasons 1 and 2 were just so different.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? That's kind of like, I don't know. I really like that perspective. My number 6, the reason this became 6 and Ahsoka 7, because it easily could have went the other way around, is actually for a reason I forgot to mention. The Ahsoka episode where they went to the world between worlds was this beautiful exterior, but I built the house of straw. Like there was no substance to that. It looked gorgeous, but there was, I think the problem with Ahsoka, which isn't the problem with my number 6, is that Ahsoka didn't grow or change. I don't think at all in that series. And that's a problem. She's a profoundly important character that is probably more multifaceted than a lot of them, which brings me to my number 6. My number 6 is the Book of Boba Fett. I ranked it above Ahsoka. I like this series. Now, I've actually gone back to it quite a bit, which may surprise you. Now, the reason I have is because I use a lot of it in my mythology courses. Because Mandalorian is in 3 episodes, I believe. It might be in 4. Every episode he is in is absolute Star Wars platinum. Platinum. Above gold. A lot of people say, oh, this is Mandalorian 2.5. No, it isn't. It's the Book of Boba Fett. It's a book. If it's called the Book of Boba Fett, and that's the precept that we're supposed to kind of espouse ourselves to, books have different characters in a novel, and he is an important character in Boba Fett's life. He helps Boba Fett get his armor back, which is so important to his family. Are there a couple episodes that are a little strange, or moments in certain episodes that don't work, and that whole biker gang and all this kind of stuff? Yeah, but I mean, there's a lot of that even in the original trilogy, some random things that just kind of stick out. I would argue the second episode where he teaches, or is it the third, where he teaches those Tuskens and they rob that train, and at the end he gets his own Gaffney stick. Yeah, and he goes to that spiritual journey. I would put that episode with anything that Disney has done with Star Wars. That was tremendous. It's because of that, the incredible stuff that it brings the lore of the Mandalorian Din Djarin to even more richness, and Luke Skywalker for extended amount of time on screen with Ahsoka Tano. I have goosebumps now. Are you kidding? If you haven't rewatched those again in a while, friends, you got to do it. It's about as good as it gets. And for those reasons, and the fact that Boba Fett, we may not like what happened, but he does change. He does grow. He's a different character than what we've known. So I don't know that I'm crazy about that, but he's not my character. So there we have it. Book of Boba Fett for me, number 6.
I just got to agree by saying you got to remember that's where the Mando gets the N1 and you see the return of the N1. Yes. And that's a great episode and moment as well. I think of Disney era, that might be the starship I've bought the most times. I'm like, well, I need the big Lego and the little Lego, and I need the action figure. So
have we done starship rankings yet? Because I'm number 1 X-Wing, but number 2 N1. Super close.
Okay, well, don't give away your list.
Yeah, that's free.
No, you got to hold on.
I better edit that out.
No, don't do that.
I won't.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is.
And actually, we are going to take a break and resume this conversation next week. It's a really, really long one, and I don't want to give a podcast that's long. I really think this is worthy of breaking up into 2 episodes, and I think it'll be so much fun. I hope you enjoy listening to our, 987 and 6? 9876. Listen to me, Mr. English teacher all the way. Next week, we're going to do our top 5. So you got to hear the bottom 4 of our list. I want to thank Bob Gerard, Greg McLaughlin, and Dr. Greg Cass for joining me. Please let us know in our Facebook group, the CWK Cafe, how you would rank the Disney Plus Star Wars live action series. Again, join us next week for our top 5. Thank you again so much for joining me and all of us on Coffee with Kenobi. Remember to check out coffeewithkenobi.com/DisneyWish to sign up for your no-cost, no-obligation quote and join us on the Disney Wish with MEI Travel and Mouse Fan Travel. Thanks again, everybody. I'm Dan Zehr reminding you that this is the podcast you're looking for.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
There's no one here. Move along.